Welcome to Attitude of Altitude podcast presented by Planet of One. This podcast is designed to inspire change in people to become the best versions of themselves and live their best lives. We share stories of struggle and success to encourage and empower listeners to be bold, take action, and be the change we desire to see in this world. We are all part of this planet. We are all a planet of one. Know that your attitude determines your altitude in life. Welcome to the podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Attitude of Altitude. I am very happy to have with us today Mr. Alan Bush. And
Hello.
the best way, hi, Alan. And the best way that I can introduce Alan is he's the producer of the podcast that you are listening to right now. And the way that we connected was through a great friend of ours, Casey Preston, who actually took me to see Alan so that I can begin to produce this show. So allow me to introduce Mr. Alan Bush. How are you this morning?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Rima. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I've been looking forward for us to chat because it's been a full season of this podcast.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's been quite a journey, not because of the podcast itself, but because of all the things that I have had the opportunity to learn and share with you as we both grow. Would you let the audience know a little bit about your background, how you became the producer and the things that you're working on? Because you have a lot of things that you're working on.
Yeah.
Please tell the audience a little bit about you.
Sure. So I'm a 14-year veteran in the internet marketing space. I kind of stumbled into that career because I went to school for psychology, and I had a variety of careers before then. I wouldn't say careers, jobs before then. And you wouldn't see the clear path to getting to being internet marketing guru. But I was a financial analyst. Did sales right before the internet marketing job. I was an admin assistant. I was a bartender. There's a lot of different jobs that I had. And up until that stage, I was just hopping between things. And this is right after college. And then about, 14 years ago, someone gave me an opportunity to interview for an internet marketing job, more formally SEO. If people aren't familiar with SEO, it's search engine optimization. And the guy told me about what the job would be. And I said, it sounds like a combination of everything that I've done before. And he said, I agree with you. Matter of fact, we can teach you the rest. So I said, okay, cool. So he gave me an opportunity. What happened there is that I just kind of fell in love with that industry. And so I stayed with it, obviously, until now. But also, this is another segue into, I currently work for a company called Ignite Visibility. And that's another agency. I hopped between agencies during my tenure. And that, right, the first week there, the owner of that company said, would you want to teach? And I said, I guess. I never thought about that. And he introduced me to somebody at UCSD, same kind of thing. Have you taught before? I said, no. And do you have this degree? I was like, no. They were like, well, okay, I guess you'd get the job because of your experience. So they gave me an opportunity to teach. And the lady gave me a nice compliment saying that if you had not told me you're not taught before, I wouldn't have believed you because you seem to be a natural. So that led me to then meeting our mutual friend. Casey was a student of mine, and Casey ended up, we became friends after the class. She even worked with Ignite Visibility at the company that she worked with. They became a client. And so we stayed in touch, and that segue kind of led us to connect. Now, how I became a producer was that I worked on a podcast called Win the Web, one company ago, before the one I'm at now. And the director of social media got hired, and it was funny because he's a little bit younger than I am, but he was only there a month, and I saw he had a great energy, and he's just a dynamic kind of guy. And I had been thinking about doing a podcast, but I didn't really know what to do or how to do it. And I said, hey, Andrew, I'm thinking about doing a podcast. And he goes, dude, we're totally doing that. Yeah. And he was the catalyst that got it started. So we had a show that was internationally known, and we did like 115 episodes. And then we had a different show right after that because we both left that company. And it was just from then on, I kind of fell in love with podcasting. So I've done quite a few podcasts: the Win the Web, Owning Your Own, the Creative Hustler, which I think is still online right now, and the Dad University podcast. And those are the ones that I actively was involved with, either co-hosting or producing myself. And then now we're circling back to how you and I met. Casey, know all that about me. Found out that you wanted to do a podcast, and so she thought it would be really great to introduce us, which I totally agree. It was actually meant to be, right? So Casey brought you to meet me at my current place, my studio in Ocean Beach, California. And that's what led me to say, hey, why don't I just produce this with you, work with you? Because I really like your message. I really enjoy you as a person, obviously. And I think that really our paths are a lot more in common than just a podcast, which leads us to keep talking every week, right? You and I talk pretty much weekly. So it's kind of funny that we're like formally talking online, but we talk all the time.
I love to break it down for people what you said about your path, because we take it sometimes lightly, but you said yes to things when you weren't completely ready. Right. You said yes to things that someone would look at them and they go, you don't have all the credentials, but you didn't need all the credentials. Right. Would you talk a little more about that? Because there's so many people that I feel are, including me, as I started this podcast. In my mind, I was spinning. It's like, oh my God, I don't know how to do. I was concentrating on the wrong things. So Casey stepped up and introduced me and allowed us to play in that arena so that I can put out a podcast. Of course, anyone can do anything they want. So would you go down that path of how you made those decisions and why you say yes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important. That's a great point that you brought up, because sometimes you feel like you're not qualified, but you are. You're 100% qualified. You just got to learn. Someone has to give you an opportunity to learn and be patient with you. And the thing is, the job I started that path on was the financial analyst job, because at the time I was an admin assistant, more or less, and I was working under a different person named Dan. Dan got a new job within the company. He goes, hey, sorry, man, I'm moving to a different department, and you're going to be working under this person named Demi. And Demi, to not to her, I'm not, if she's listening, was a little intimidating. Even though she was like a little lady, she was kind of an intimidating person because she's very stern, strong-willed, you know. And I just had this kind of impression, like, oh man, this is going to be crazy. So, but within that realm, I was she kind of explained what my role would be, and I said okay. And then I helped her out, and I remember going to her with a few different issues that I was looking to improve, and without getting into too much detail, I said, hey Demi, I think we could do this way. It might be better. It was related to the database that we were using. And she's like, huh. And then she sat down. And what I liked about Demi is she knew how to do everyone's job. So she sat down and worked out the numbers. She's like, yeah, I think you're right. And then eventually I did that a couple times. And she was like, you know, you're a little too smart to be doing what you're doing right now. Would you want to do something else? Like, would you want to be a financial analyst? I said, sure. Yeah. Because to me, I wasn't qualified. I didn't go to school for finance or even business or accounting. I went to school for psychology, but I understood things and I can learn. And if you're gonna pay me to learn something, that's great. Like an opportunity to do anything, you know. And so that was to me an elevated. I didn't even get a raise, I don't think, at that time. I just got the job and eventually got the raise. But they wanted to see if I could do it, of course. But that was a motif, because I stopped doing I was financial analyst for like 3 years. And then I went into, I got to get out of Long Beach where I was. I was like, I don't want to live here anymore. And I called up a couple of friends that lived in San Diego, one of which was I went to college with, one of which I was friends with since grade school. And both of them had an opportunity, because I said, I may need a place to live. One of them said, we could get you a place to live, man. Like, my friend has a house. You could rent that spot out. I said, okay, I'll think about it. Called my other friend. Hey, I'm thinking about moving to San Diego, but I don't have if you can know any jobs, let me know. He goes, I can get you a job. What? And he was like, my brother's a branch manager at we're a brokerage. I work with him. You know, you'd have to sell loans. Okay. never did that before, but it was an opportunity knocking each time. And I'm like, well, okay, let's do that. Why not? And I never did loans. That was another great move, even though it was tough, because you only work on commissions. And so I didn't make any money, and I was broke, and it was up and down. Like, it was tumultuous, because sometimes it'd be a great month and sometimes it'd be zero. Sometimes the loans would be there, but I have to get them to fund. I can't fund them. So I don't get the money until that happens. So I did that for about a year. But what it really taught me, the financial analysis taught me how to manage numbers and projects. The loan job taught me to be a lot more assertive, and because I had to be, otherwise I would starve. So I had developed life skill sets from these series of jobs, and that's why I say yes to them, because it's basically opportunity to learn something about yourself. And if someone just presents something like that, take it, especially if you have nothing to lose. And it doesn't matter whether or not you're qualified, quote unquote, you learn, right? If you have that more of an adventurous spirit towards it, of course I was scared, and it wasn't easy, but I learned something. And all those jobs that I mentioned led me to doing the internet marketing job. Again, I applied for any job that was online and that I thought I could get. The guy called me up, named Keith, and said, would you want to work in the SEO business? I didn't know what SEO was when he called me. So I looked it up. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? So then I got into the job. I prepared a little bit on my understanding of everything, and then got that job, and then led to me to going down the career. And then teaching was the next step. Same thing. I haven't done it before, but give me the opportunity. Now I love it. I'm doing it for 6 years. I think that's the calling I had, was education. I didn't know that until I started that job. And when you get to a certain stage in a career, I feel like you owe it to yourself to then show others that. And I was thankfully given an opportunity at a university to do that. So like I said, sometimes life is a weird path. It's not always direct, but it takes you, going back to a theory that I keep bringing up, is that there's a gravity to certain things. And maybe that bright spot brings you in. But once you take a step back, you start seeing that the dots connect, and there's a constellation of your life happening. Sometimes it's not very apparent because you're so right and immersed in it, and it's so bright that you're like, I can't see anything right now. But once you take a step back and look, you can see where those dots connect. Mine happen to be very far away, but then they lead to something really grand and big. And so there is something that I'm working on that will basically explain that.
Before we jump into that, I'd love for you to share, as a professor, even as you began, to today, how your teaching style has evolved.
Yeah.
Because I've been privy to see some of it. So where you started to where you are today from what you're learning.
Yeah, I think when I started teaching, I have a natural propensity to teach. I think only because the jobs I've had prior and now I've been eventually in a position of leadership. So I had to be a director, and then now I'm a VP. That allowed me to kind of lead classes and that type of stuff with my peers. But I never formally taught. And when I started, I was nervous. I didn't have everything prepared, honestly. I had half of the lecture that I wanted to do, and I wasn't sure where I wanted to go with it. You have to fill space, obviously, because you're up there in front of people. And at the time, it was in person, and it was the entire day. So there was 4 days a week, or 3 days a week, depending on the semester. The students were with me all day, and they were done by the end of the week. So it's the same amount of hours as you've been a part of the class. It's normally once a week for 3 hours. This was for 7.5 hours each day. So they had 28 hours of the crash course, right? But it was kind of fun. And actually, thankfully, the owners of Ignite Visibility were comfortable with me doing that for that week. They're like, yeah, you're kind of spreading the word about us anyway. So, don't worry about it. You don't have to take time off or anything. We'll pay you. Oh, okay, cool. I get to do a job and have my job still there. So it was like I was very fortunate, and I really appreciate them doing that. And so at first it was a little shaky, in my opinion, but people didn't know that. I think I was good at faking it, and I didn't have everything prepared. So now it just flows off the tongue. I don't have to worry about it as much, but I was worried about my pacing and timing and where I need to go with it, and if people had questions or if people were bored. So I had to basically become a dynamic person. And because I didn't want them to be bored and just fall asleep. They're with me for 7 hours. They're going to be, they're tired at the end of the day, right? So I have to be a lot more interesting in talking about dry subject matter in some cases. So that allowed me to, what I did is I reflected on how I would like to be taught, and then said, okay, well, let me just become that. And so I did. And thankfully, students took a shine to it, and now, as I've evolved, especially over the years, the class has changed a bit. I'm now doing it once a week. It's easier on some level, but it's at night. So again, you still have to be dynamic, and they're coming off their day of work or class. And one thing cool about this class, by the way, is that I get a variety of students. I don't have just students per se. It's open to the public to take it. So matter of fact, if anyone out there wanted to sign up, they could go to the UCSD website and look up the SEO class. Anyone can take it. And so I've had business owners, marketers, entrepreneurs, basically students as well, people from the university that are a part of a program, because it is part of the curriculum. So a wide variety of different types of people take that class. And then I've had some businesses like Sony or GoFundMe. The people from there have taken my class, which was really interesting because I'm like, what are you guys doing here? So, and now it's very easy for me to get up in front of people. Before, I'd be nervous and shaking. Now it's like, what do you want to know? And I look at people like, I realized when I first started teaching that I didn't have to be nervous, because they're here to learn from me from something. Why am I nervous about them? I looked at the audience, or the students, like that. I was like, oh, wait a minute, you guys are almost just as nervous as I am. so it changed my dynamic, and I was like, okay, I why am I nervous? I don't have to be. I don't want the knowledge. And then no question they asked, I couldn't at least answer something. So, and even if I couldn't, I'd be like, well, let me get back to that, So it was a definite shift in mindset when I was able to sit in front of, coming to the fact that I used to be a really shy boy. Up until I became, I don't know, right before I did SEO, I was relatively shy. I didn't like getting in front of people and doing speeches and stuff. Now I'm like, yeah, I'll do it, whatever. And it's the same thing. I do public speaking gigs, and sometimes I'll, for the company or for myself, or someone wants me to be on a panel. And I'm like, sure, I'll do it. Doesn't matter what it is, I'll do it, And I mean, obviously within reason. But matter of fact, a couple of years ago, I did one for realtor.org, and I was on a panel, and the place where the event was only like 10-minute drive at the most, but it's at the convention center where Comic-Con normally is. But there was so much traffic that when I was driving there, I was like, oh my God, it took an hour to get there. So I was about to be late, and I ran to it was at the other end where I parked. I had to run all the way across the building, and I got mic'd up, and they were like about to introduce the panelists, and like, whoa, okay, he showed up. Like, oh my gosh, I felt so embarrassed. But the minute I sat down, I calmed down. The minute I got in front of hundreds of people, I was calm, and I saw my people that were on the panel with me. They had notes and all this stuff. I didn't. I'm like, what do you need notes for? They're going to ask questions. I don't care. And then it sounds arrogant, but it wasn't. It was just like this weird Zen came over me, and I'm like, okay. And then, so the panelists asked questions and we answered them. And then the audience asked questions. And I would say 90% of the audience questions were for me about internet marketing. They were really interested in that because they were trying to build their own websites and how do we do it. And So I was answering all these questions. And the moderators are, well, I'm glad you showed up, because there's a lot of questions for you. And I was like, yeah, I guess I was too. But the mindset I had there was completely different than I was even 5 years prior. My mindset has shifted so much, and I've changed so much as a person, elevated on some level, because I stopped being worried about what it was that I was doing and just became in the moment. So I think it was really appropriate to just take the chance, go after it. It's not as a big deal as you think it is. And then sometimes you might have fun doing it. And that's exactly what happened.
Thank you for saying that, because truly that's exactly what I wanted the listeners to hear. When you first became a professor, were first in your head, all about how do you present, what do you say, and how do you show up. And when you got out of that mindset and you showed up to teach, because that's where your expertise lies, is in that person being in front of you and needing to learn something. And when you stepped out of the how to and just showed up, you became a better professor. You started getting opportunities to get speaking gigs. You got opportunities to be on panels. Because now it's not about the how to anymore, which is basically, I'm going to say gratitude and a thank you to you for me, for the podcast, because I was in the how to when we first connected. I was so spinning in my head and all the little things about doing a podcast. And you gave me the opportunity to sit in front of the mic. Casey's sitting with us, and we just chatted. And it allowed me to get out of my head and really get back into my heart, my soul, my message, what the purpose of doing this podcast to begin with. So I want to say gratitude to that as we work together on a lot of things. And I want to lead us back to why we're connecting so much more, honestly, because I've learned my message is about encouraging people to see the greatness that's within them, no matter what's going on around them, what's going on within them, and how are they putting it out there. And then I learned from our talks that you're working on your own programs. You're working on creating something much bigger than where you are today. Would you share a little bit about that and what you would really envision? Because I know it's coming really soon. What are you envisioning this program to do for the public?
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because I would express gratitude to you as well, where when we met, we were practicing the podcast and getting, trying to formulate what it is that you're trying to do and what we eventually did, right? We're not even trying anymore. And it was really cool because I watched you evolve and become now what is now your show. But in the beginning, we just, like you said, chatted and just kind of talked it out. And the impetus of what I'm trying to do, or what I am doing, I should say, is that I want to draw that out of people. Like, find your purpose, discover who you really are and what you're all about. What is it that you're aiming to accomplish? And there's a pattern underneath all of these things. And then I learned it mostly from the marketing techniques. Like, people had an underlying thing that they're trying to capture. They're aiming to capture. And a lot of clients know what they sell, but they don't know why they sell it. And there's a great talk by Simon Sinek that a lot of people quote now that got me thinking about that, obviously, but really the underlying why, how, what. Really, I broke it down in the beginning to understanding you, and then understanding what audience members you want to talk to. And once you understand that, you then move into, well, who are the pinnacles of excellence that you would like to emulate? What do they have that you would like to accomplish and or adopt? It doesn't have to be competitors. And then slowly but surely you move through 7 different phases of your program or your movement or your podcast or whatever it is that you're accomplishing. And I found a pattern with all of them. Eventually it was like, wait, everyone goes through these phases for the most part. And within those phases, there's 7 different things you have to think about. And so I kept saying these pattern with 7s, but B, the underlying messaging within that space was very similar to almost everyone trying to accomplish something in their end goals. You have to go through these things. Now you could jump over them, you could skip through it, it's okay. But if you were starting anything, at first I thought it was just a marketing plan for me. But it was like, well, actually, you could do this as business, or you could do this for a movement, or you could do this for, if you're just starting a campaign, you could just take the same evaluation techniques. And so it became bigger and bigger the more I thought about it. And then I was like, wait, I could help a lot more people than not just marketers, or not just marketing a business or marketing a program. It's like, there's a whole different thing. You could apply to life. And where you and I connect is that it's very similar to your program. Your program, from my understanding, is more of an inward focus on discovering your inner path inside, and mine is outward. it's a path discovering what you're aiming to be or what you're aiming to accomplish. I mean, there's part of it to know yourself. It's almost like I would suggest that people go through your phase first, your program, and then get to know yourself, then start with mine, and then get to know what it is that you're trying to accomplish, or you're aiming to accomplish. And it was a very strange, because we had not really talked about your program. We just met happenstance by helping with the podcast. But the more I listened to you talk, I was like, let me keep being involved. I'll be, let's just talk. Let's just keep this going. I'll produce it, and I like what you're doing. And then eventually you got to the stage where you're interviewing great people, and I would say all of your guests have been wonderful. And yeah, so if this is the first episode, please go back and listen to all the guests that Rima has had on here. There's amazing accounts that people have gone through. But the underlying message was very similar. We have a very similar approach to how we deal with life and circumstances and things. And we are also both building a program that helps explain that for people. And so it was very weird. It's very strange how it all married up. But it also aligns with the theory I brought up earlier, is that there's a gravity. And once you're starting to form something, and it becomes stronger and bigger, maybe, and there's people that revolve around that. So in some level, you're calling it to yourselves. And for us, we were calling it to each other, right? We both had that gravity that we're trying to draw in, that we're aiming, like, we got to do something about this thing that keeps building inside me, that I want to help. And I want to teach people. And I want to let people know that they can accomplish things that they want, but not in a self-help guru type of way, more in a, like, let me empower you. Let me encourage you. And I'll show you things the tools you need to do it for yourself, right? And I think that's the most important part. Like, here's a template that you could use to help guide along the way. You don't have to do it all. You could use parts of it, but at least try these things first, and then go with it from here on out. And then, it's not a I hate to use stereotypical language. It's just not stereotypical. It's not like you could believe, you could achieve, things of that nature. It's like, well, come on, life it's not always like that. It's okay, but I understand that those things happen. So let's move through this together, and then by the end of it, we're hoping that you'll come out with it being a better self. And that for me, it's more about the outward, and for you, it's more about the inward. So we're definitely in pairs with each other. Matter of fact, you and I are encouraging each other to get this thing done. It's for by early next year, we'll both have our programs ready. So I really appreciate you, by the way, for encouraging me, and also me joining the group that you're a part of. And that was really, thank you for me. Yeah, that was a very helpful thing. A lot of the people that you've interviewed, a few of the people that you've interviewed actually are part of that group as well. And I've got to meet some wonderful people and got some encouragement, and it exponentially got faster once I started forming this program. When I was able to share it, then this is another lesson for certain people. Sometimes you're not always ready to share what you want to think and do. You need to formulate things in your head. But if you once you're ready and you allow that, you take a chance and hand it over and see how people react to it. And so being part of the group, talking to you, talking to a handful of others, they showed a different perspective, which allowed me to grow way faster than if I was just doing it by myself, right? And you want to share it with people that you trust and respect. You don't want people to steal your ideas and run with it, But that being said, there is something to be said for, you don't have to be solo. Even if you're the one that's championing it, you're not alone, because people will help you build what it is that most people, if you're in a good circle, will want to help you. They don't expect money in return or whatever it is. They'll be glad to give opinions. Everybody's got an opinion, right? And hopefully it's constructive feedback, or another angle, or maybe just something you hadn't seen before. I noticed this. This is really great for that. And oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I didn't think of it that way. I talked to a friend of mine, one of the guys who actually helped me move here, or convinced me to move here, and about my program. And he said, oh, it's almost like you could grade people and where they are, their evaluation. And I hadn't really thought of it as a grading thing at first, because it's more of a process and activity and thinking. But yeah, I guess I could just see where you are in the program that I'm building, and then use that as to then lure them in and then draw them through it and help them improve their score, so to speak. But I hadn't thought of it until I shared that with him. And it was just a thought that he had on it. I'm like, that's a good idea. And then that might change everything. The whole thing might change, or at least the beginning of it might change. So it's really important to really appreciate what you have, but also share it with your peers so they can help you improve upon it. And I'm really grateful for that, for sure.
You're saying it as a gravity thing, and I think of it as the same way as you're building your frequency. So when we started talking and we started to build the actual podcast, we were building the frequency of the energy that we're putting out there. And then we started talking about our programs and the things that we are already doing in some sense, but putting them out there in a bigger format to reach a bigger audience and allow more people to grow within who they are and what they're putting out into the world. We were just raising that frequency. So you coming into the mastermind, which we're all a part of, and there's 12 of us, 11 to 12 of us at any time, that are all working on our own thing. But what's happening is we all build each other's frequency, and you're calling it a gravity, kind of pulling in the things that matter. And I really would like people to catch that point, especially in this year that we've gone through COVID, gone through a lot of growth. Some people have kind of contracted.
Yeah.
Well, this is a time for expansion. This is the time that you grew your program. You're putting your program out there. I had the opportunity to actually put out the podcast instead of spinning on other things.
Right.
So really the growth that's available to all of us is amazing.
Yeah.
From what we're able to achieve by just being grounded, by understanding where we're heading. So I love that our ideas kind of align, but they're never exactly the same.
Right.
And that's exactly what helps people move along. So if you had a recommendation for people that are struggling right now, what would you say to them, Alan?
Let go of the things that weigh you down. You can't, it's okay to feel those things. It's okay to carry baggage at times, but eventually you have to let it go because it slows you down. And the more you linger on those things, the slower it is to get to where you want to be because you're carrying this heavy weight. And sometimes the path isn't clear, and it's okay. I think the main thing that I had to learn, I went through depression and being alone and just when I first moved to San Diego, I had a couple friends and then they left. And then I was kind of by myself again and I was broke and I didn't have a job that was like paying the bills, and it was hard, but got through it. That job taught me a lot. And then I eventually moved into a career. So then I rediscovered why I moved to San Diego, but it wasn't very apparent at first. And so I had to let go of all the things that I shouldn't have done this. I should have did this. This didn't happen this way. If so-and-so did such and such, I could have had this. Never mind. It's okay. Okay, these things happen. Get mad, get frustrated in the moment, and then let it go. And what happens is that once you're able to say, okay, and forgive the people that have gotten in your way or caused you some kind of harm, because that's holding on still. If you don't forgive them, if you always hold a grudge or you resent them, no, they're there to teach you something. So my philosophy is those bright spots that you see behind me are the little great things that are happening in your life, but they're only in contrast to those dark spots that have shaped those things. So you need to appreciate both of them, because if everything was bright, you wouldn't see anything, right? So you have to be able to say, these dark times allow me to appreciate these bright spots. And some are going to be brighter than others, and some are going to be darker than others. But if you could pull through those things and you understand that, you'll start to see the beauty behind you. And literally, in my case, but in a lot of cases, you'll turn around and go, oh, that was actually kind of cool how that happened. Wow. And I'm glad I'm here now. And then eventually you start appreciating you and appreciating the journey, whether it be bumpy or not. and the people, whether they be great or not, you'll start appreciating them. And that you have to hold on to that ideal and move forward. Don't worry about what's happening. Just move forward. Keep going. My grandfather had a great quote. He told me, I think he was in his 80s, maybe late 80s. He lived to be 95. So I trust a lot of things that he says. And he's doing it right. He did it right for a long time. He said, secret of life is just keep moving. Because he had lost his wife. He had, gone through a war. He lost one of his daughters. My aunt passed away, and he lost his wife when he was 82, 83. But he kept moving. He did what he did. He'd walk, take walks, read the paper, go to the bar, local hangout he'd go to well into his 90s, and get a drink and go home and just deal with life. He didn't mope. He didn't let things get him down. He just feels sad once in a while. He's told me it was difficult around the holidays, of course, but he didn't run away from the pain. Just steered into it. Just like, okay, it's right now it's terrible. Yeah, right. But all right, I'll get up tomorrow and I'll keep moving. I'll keep doing my thing. I'm not going to be sad at all the time. And so he still had this good spirit about him, and still had friends around, still had family around up until he passed away. And the same thing. Like, I carry that with me. Keep moving. It's okay. Like, life, it doesn't have to be all bad. So I think if you're struggling, it's okay. If you're going through something, it's totally okay. And you'll get through it. You just got to understand that gravity is happening. And right now, there'll be people around you that might start revolving around you that you might need, or maybe you don't need them. So maybe you need to loosen it, and then their orbits spin out away from you, and you spin in a different direction. But all of it changes your course of where you're going. But you just got to keep moving. And that's the most important thing I had to learn.
That's wonderful. You touched on something that I get to live every day. I live with my parents who are in their late 80s. Mm-hmm. And their idea is just like your grandfather, keep moving. Yeah. Don't get stuck anywhere. Keep moving. Life is continually moving. And you also kind of touched on the whole idea of the podcast is I interview people that are incredible, have gone through lots of things, have grown through them, and kept on moving to get to a better level, to get to a better person, to get to a better life for themselves and for the people around them. So thank you for touching on that, because that really is the theme of the podcast. That is really the theme of us continuing to work together. So, Alan, what is the best way for people to connect with you, to get to know you a little better, maybe to work with you? What's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, mostly LinkedIn is my preferred method of getting in touch. So go through LinkedIn.com and find Alan Bush. You're probably one of the few that are up there. I'm the guy with the hat. And so I'm pretty I wear this hat most of the time. You can also get me on Twitter or social media. I would say email alanhbush@gmail.com. That's probably ALANHBUSH@gmail.com. I have some websites coming up. I'll promote them another time. But that right now they're in the works. I will say the domain I'm working on is wavesofinfinity.com. Pay attention to what's going on there. I'm going to be putting up things there, but right now it's in progress. So start with LinkedIn, and then we'll talk there.
I hope you're all catching it, that we're continually being in progress. He's not working on one thing and just it's done. He's continually in progress, as all of us are. We're continually moving forward. So, Alan, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience that I may not have touched on, that you go, oh my God, I wish I had said this to them? Is there anything else?
No, this is great, Rima. I really appreciate being on the show and working on the show with you. It's been quite a journey this year. We basically got the podcast started and made improvements. And I think season 2 is coming up, right? Season 2. So stay tuned for season 2. We're going to have some improvements. We're going to have a little bit different format. I think everything will be good going forward. New guests, new attitude, and new year. So cheers to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. Guys, thank you so much. Alan, I so appreciate everything that you're working on and what you're growing through, as we're all growing through something. And to the audience, please remember that your attitude determines your altitude in life. So if you want things to get better, if you want things to grow, start checking in with your own self and where your attitude is. Thank you so much. We'll see you in our next season with brand new guests and some great information so that you can continue to grow. Thank you. We'll see you next season.